What you're going to see now is an analysis of our class for teaching and learning English as a foreign language course. We are Valentina Cataldo and Paulina Vega.
To contextualize, we have to create a lesson plan and put in practice on the Access program settled in the Pontificia Universidad Católica de Valparaíso. Our class was conformed by 9 students between 14 and 60 years old with different levels of English. Some of them were beginners and others were advanced learners.
This analysis contains 3 strands, which are class management, inductive approach when teaching grammar, and some steps of the Hunter model. And finally, we're going to analyze what we consider was our main weakness, giving instructions and time management.
According to Scrivener in Learning Teaching in 2005, the classroom management has to do with the creation of better conditions to learn. In this case, we are going to focus on the organization of the students in the classroom to work, which was one of the positive aspects of our lesson. Scrivener stated that the student-student interaction has to increase because it encouraged friendly, relaxed, and comfortable learning environment. What we did was make students work in pairs when they had to create questions in order to describe artists. They had to come up with 4 questions where they got the opportunity to interact. Also, an important factor of student-student interaction is have a certain arranged sitting in order to see each other when they talk. In our case, we use the horseshoe arrangement for them to sit, which is beneficial for them because they felt that they were equally since they make eye contact. As a consequence, our role as teacher was also equal, being closer with them. In the last activity, my partner separated them into 2 groups. She decided who were going to belong to each group. As Scrivener explained, this may help them to interact with their different classmates and reinforce the fellowship. In the same activity, students were able to move from their seat since they had to stand up to participate. This is highly recommended by Scrivener because they stayed active and make they don't feel bored.
In the activity in which the students were asked to create the questions to ask for information about the famous artist, we faced an unexpected situation that had to do with grammar teaching. The questions they created had grammatical mistakes because they didn't use the structures of a question, which is W words plus verb plus subject plus complement. For example, one of the students said where he is from instead of saying where is he from. According to Larsen Freeman in his book Language Teaching from Grammar to Grammar in 2003, it is important to develop understanding of the grammatical facts of the language, but these facts are not what we want our students to learn. We want to make sure that the students use the grammatical structures accurately without giving them the meaningless rules in isolation that may be hard for them to retrieve. However, instead of telling them what the mistake was and giving them the correct structure to make questions, we wrote the sentence in the Word. We point to the part where the mistake was and we let them know that there was a mistake. Then we asked them if they could see what the mistake was, and one of the students corrected the sentence. And later we gave a brief explanation about how the verb and the subject switches the place in a question. We didn't want to give them the correct answer in the first place, because we wanted them to think. And this served us to realize that some students had trouble to correctly create questions, and we used an inductive approach so that they can think based on what they know and figure out what the mistake was before we gave them the grammatical explanation.
You can tell me the same question. I know. was born. Okay. It could be he, she, they, it could be a event.
I think we have the same problem with the pronunciation. When? Yeah.
Yes.
That's correct. But the question is
It's correct. But the auxiliary is the problem.
remember that for questions you have to do it over this one and this one changes.
As we use Hunter model based on Madeline Hunter in Mastery Teaching 1982 to create our lesson plan, we use 5 steps of this model which help us to get a successful class. These steps are anticipatory set, input, modeling, checking for understanding, and closure. In anticipatory set, the objective is state and prepare them for what they are going to learn. In our case, we state our objective, that was they were able to describe a musician, and we prepare them asking what music genres they know and which artists belong to each genre. Input is the presentation of new information. We used a listening about the description of a musician in which they should get information about him. This gave them the knowledge of which information they need to know in order to describe a musician. In modeling, the teacher demonstrates with actions or examples what they are learning. This is helpful for students to understand, especially the activities. We use this step in the instruction for the activities. For instance, we gave an example in the activity when they had to grade questions, and in the last activity, we modeled the activity by playing first. In checking for understanding, in this step, the students affirm that they understand what they have to do. We use this step at the end of giving the instruction, asking one student to explain to the class what they had to do. In the closure, it is of great importance that the class has a wrap-up to teacher assess the knowledge that the students learn in class. Because running out of time, we ask them which information they consider important to describe a musician.
My name is Lolita.
And we are going to be your teacher today. Today we're going to see descriptions of musicians and artists. Okay? Well, what do you know about music? For example, genre, type of music. For example, country music. What else? Pop music, okay? Rock music. Electronic, okay. Good one. What else? Indie. Right, okay. Romantic, yes. Good one. Hip hop. What? Rock. You haven't participated. R&B, okay. The Beatles? Ah, okay. But what we know about those types of music? For example, which artist do you know that sings
Classical Music Hour here on Radio KYOU. I'm your host, Vanessa Hansen. We have a special program for you this evening. 1 hour of great piano music.
Okay, now we're going to show you an example of what you have to do. Okay? Before you get in your groups. Okay. Valentina is going to be the person who has to guess who the artist is. No, you. I have to guess? Yes. So I have you do the questions.
No, I answer the questions.
You answer? Okay, I will be asking the question. I will try to guess. And she has to provide the information, okay?
Okay, ask.
The first question, is this a singer or a band?
Here's the singer.
Is this artist a woman or a man?
Is the artist
from Indiana, United States. Okay. Which are the most famous songs? The most famous songs are Thriller, Criminal, and Billie Jean. You know, the artist is Michael Jackson. Okay. You're right. Okay, now it's a writing and speaking activity. You need to work in pairs with the next one, you see them, and create a set of at least 4 questions in pairs that you will ask to know more about an artist. Do you understand what you have to do? For example, give me this one. Erin, who's that? What do we have to do now? Okay. You can work the beautiful. There is an example for you here. That is which flower? To sum up this question, which kind of information would you ask someone to describe a person? For example, famous song. Okay, another. Where is from? No. Sorry. Any information you would ask? Singer or band? Nicholas?
What do they do in their free time?
What do they do in their free time? Where is it from?
What type of music he likes?
Very good. Type of music you like? What type of music does she or he play? Did he have an album? Yeah?
Who listens to his music? Or
Who listens to his music?
or
What does he or she play? Very good. Okay, that was the lesson. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.
According to the Minute Book, there are 9 features that must be considered when giving instructions. Distribute the worksheets, provide students with visual sample of the task, give a time limit, model the instruction, invite students to model the instruction for their peers, having students show they are prepared, ask comprehension check questions, circle and monitor the class, and finally review the answers. In one of the activities in which they were supposed to create the questions to ask for information about famous artists, even though after we gave the instructions and we asked a student to explain to the classmate what they were supposed to do to make sure they understood, while we were monitoring, we realized that 2 students were doing something different than we expected them to do. In that sense, the instructions for that particular activity were not clear enough, and we had to explain instructions again for those students. That is definitely something that we must consider when teaching, to include all 9 features to avoid misunderstandings, and so the students can successfully achieve the task. In addition, giving clear instructions helps to maximize time. There always seems to be short. According to an article called Time Management in Classroom, published by the Center for Teaching Support and Innovation of the University of Toronto in 2005, we as teachers have to be flexible. We should be able to reshape our lesson plan on the fly to respond to different demands and estimate the time each task will take. In our case, we were always running out of time, so on the way we had to change the instructions. And since we were using a clock on the board, it was confusing for students who were told that they had 3 minutes to do an activity and that we had to set the clock again while it was running. So although it is hard to keep control of time, it is important to consider that time is relative and not to use the clock because there might be some changes.
In sum, we strongly believe that our class was a success. We enjoyed it, especially at the end with the game activity to describe musicians or artists. We had so much fun with them. But most importantly, we realized that students learned because they were all capable of asking a questions to describe an artist at the end of the lesson.
There is a lot of things to take into account during teaching. Our weaknesses when giving instructions are important to consider because if students don't understand what they have to do, they won't be able to participate. But with time, practice, and planning, these weaknesses can be overcome.
All in all, it was a great experience that brings us closer into what we are going to be in the future as teachers of English. And thanks to this opportunity, we will be able to improve our lesson plans and our practice in general. Thanks for watching.